Welcome everyone to the Adversity to Advantage podcast. Today we're very privileged to have Leyla Okhai on the line with us. She is the founding director of Diverse Minds UK, which I'm just excited about in general. She enables organizations to create a more productive workplace by talking and supporting mental health, which obviously my listeners know is a passion close to my heart around mental health at work. So welcome to the show, Leyla.
Thank you so much for having me, Petra.
It's really good to have you. So as you know, this topic is all around adversity, resilience. What are the things in our life that have impacted us in some way and have allowed us to kind of either strengthen our character or punched us in the face? There's a range of things, right? I'd love to just get a bit of context in the first instance. Well, actually, let me go back first. Tell us a little bit about Diverse Minds UK. I'd love to know what it is you're passionate about at the moment.
Thank you so much. So Diverse Minds UK, do you know what's really interesting is I never, ever thought I'd be running my own business. So for me, it's been a really interesting journey because there's a lot of business in my family. A lot of my family members are, it's a large family, run their own businesses. And I was always told, why don't you run your own business? I'd reject it because I never really understood. For me, a business was the big conglomerates and multinationals that we see. So Diverse Minds all started from when I worked at Imperial College, and my role was head of diversity and inclusion. I headed up the centre there, and I did a lot of work on mental health. So I started all the training and the support for staff on mental health first aid and beyond. And other organisations would find out about it and say, oh, Leyla, you've done this at Imperial. Will you come and do a talk for us? Will you run a training session? So I talked to my manager. She said, yeah, that's fine. You can go, but the money has to come into your budget, your departmental budget. I was like, yeah, that's fine. So I'd do some, I'd spend the money on training for the team, and then it kept happening. So I bought annual leave, and then it kept happening. And I thought, there's clearly something in this. So the passion is really from seeing people suffer and seeing really stupid, if I can use that word, policies and procedures that don't work or that people aren't following, that need to be made easier to understand and more appropriate for the employee and staff members. And actually for organisations, they've got brilliant aims, objectives and missions, but they're not really coming to life. So that's how it all started. And I've been very privileged to work with people. My work is very much workplace based, so it's not around the clinical practice. I will make a reference to and signpost people to good clinical practice, but it's really about practical steps that can be taken in the workplace to support staff.
Amazing. How long have you been running this business for?
So as a side hustle,
I recognize that term. It's very close to me. I think I've had a side hustle for 10 years.
There you go. Yeah, probably about 2.5 years, and coming up to the end of October, it will be a year that I've been doing it full time.
Amazing. Well done. I'm 6 months in, so
exciting.
The struggle is real. I know what it feels like. But such a great time to be within this, in the sense of the open conversations that people are willing to have, which is actually quite ahead of the game to some other countries, I'm realizing.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the UK still has a long way to go.
Oh, yes.
And we think about all the things that are just starting to come out around Me Too, and why I didn't report it, which is so important. And I've just read from Rape Crisis UK some information around men are less likely to be convicted of sexual violence and the mental health impacts of that. And, women are 50% of society. So why aren't we looking after 50% of society's mental health? So, yes, and there's lots of aspects to it. So really, yes, as I said, I feel really privileged. I think you're right. I'm at the right place at the right time, and there is just so much work to do.
There is so much work to do, and of course me and you could talk about mental health like all day and strategies for improving it, but I'm curious about your story. What's made you who you are today, sort of achieving at the top of your game? So give us just a bit of context. If we go right back into your history, your childhood even, do you think that your childhood, whatever that means, sort of parents' education system, gave you the resilience that you needed to run your own business and deal with life as an adult?
It's interesting because we talked about that, didn't we, a little bit before the podcast? And I said to you, no, I don't think my childhood gave me any resilience. But when you've asked that question again, and I'm reflecting on it, I think what the theme, and again, given there's a lot more discussion around Asian diaspora, and with the British Asian series on BBC, it makes you realize how I think resilience has built through journeys. So I'm third generation, and my great grandparents were from Gujarat, and then they moved to Africa, and then I was born in the States, and then I moved here. So there's a trajectory and actually adaptation.
Yeah.
And I don't think you realize it. And and so I suppose that's a big bit of resilience in terms of how you adapt. And I never felt like I fitted in the UK for a long time. So I've lived here since I was 9, until, interestingly, I went on an EU-funded program on volunteering. And it was brilliant, and I met people from across the world, and that was great. But I have never in my life, and I went to Spain and I speak Spanish, and I look more Spanish than I look, white British, obviously. I have never felt so British in my whole life, which, interestingly, I wasn't expecting. And I didn't have a particularly great time because it was doing immigrant support work. I saw some really horrific things. But again, I suppose, yes, that has prepared me. And taking a step back and thinking about that, yeah, absolutely. And another theme through my life has been bullying. So I've had a lot of bullying at school, and I know that's not uncommon. I know that happens to a lot of people, and everyone gets bullied for a different reason. And I very much felt it was because I was brown, because I didn't fit in, and I didn't have I wasn't one of the popular girls. So I always felt that. But I suppose what then happens is when you're older, like now, I don't really care. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean, if someone's rude to me, or if I don't get a contract, I think, oh, well, there's plenty more fish in the sea. And actually, I've been through worse. So this is okay. And actually, I'm in control of it. I don't have to go to school every day anymore. And if you can kind of do that, you sort of think.
I think what you're saying is that your childhood in a way did give you resilience, but often it's not the way we think it will. It's not like, oh, my parents knew exactly what to say at the right times. My teachers knew just when to push and just when to support. They supported with the bullying. Like, it's not that rosy picture. What I've noticed through all my interviews, coming up to almost a year of podcasting, is that it's when you feel like there's no support and that you're completely stuck, or you hit rock bottoms, or you get the bullying, or whatever those childhood experiences are, that actually make us able to run businesses or hold relationships or connect with, because we're like, dude, I've been through worse. What's a bit of a business up and down, right? Uncertainty,
exactly.
Right?
And at least I'm in control of it. I suppose that's another theme. I never really felt in control of my life till I was in my maybe mid to late 20s. And by that I mean I felt I was always dancing to someone else's tune, and I wasn't trying to. And it's not necessarily about people pleasing, actually, either. But yes, so now when you've got the control, it might be difficult, but I still feel like that control really, really rests with me at the moment. So again, going through all of that.
Completely. I actually resonate with that so much, because I moved every year of my life growing up, and I moved country every 3 years. Which was kind of intense and had that impact of making me really adaptable, which I can now kind of use as a strength because I work with different companies and people and all of that. But there was definitely a period of time where that adaptability meant I was never me. I'd never figured out who me was. I was just like, oh, you're from that culture and that demographic? Switch. Oh, you like that and you're from that class or society? Switch. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Until you're like, who the fuck am I? And it leads to like depression and suicide and all sorts of things, because you can get pretty lost in it. Oh, we could just talk all day. So, take us through some more themes for you around adversity that you face. So we've talked about the bullying. I often talk about rock bottom moments in our life that can sometimes be the catalyst for change or for learning. And I wonder if those terms kind of resonate with you at all.
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose one thing that sticks in my mind is around one of the first experiences I had of quite serious workplace bullying that I didn't feel I could do anything about because all this stuff was going on with my family. So as I mentioned to you, my family was imploding. So I'm an only child. I'm from a big, wider family, but I didn't really have much to do with them. I didn't grow up with them. And it was the three of us, and I don't think I'm an extreme extrovert, so being an only child was very, very, very difficult for me. And that's why I have to just be constantly doing things now. So it's very difficult. I don't think it's a very healthy dynamic. And my dad decided to leave my mum, and that's fine. I get that people want to leave people, but it was really horrific. So we had to go to court because there was no support. My mum, she was very much, that was her. She was fulfilling what she felt she wanted to do, which was being a full-time mum and looking after the home. I was also 22. So I was in a place where I had to support my mum. She, fell apart. She got very mentally unwell. And then, I haven't seen my dad for 12 years, which is a great thing, actually. But that was all imploding. Then I'd go into the workplace and it was just a mess. So it was a very prestigious institution. And the individual that I was meant to be working with, he was a real bully. It also transpired, and this is horrific, that he was looking at pornography on work computers, but that came out after he left. And, I look back and I just think, how on earth did I get through that? But it was almost like I went in, and it was a job I really believed in. So it was supporting young people from Black and Asian backgrounds to apply to university. So at least the values piece was there.
Yeah.
The environment was awful.
Yeah.
But it was for a year. So I thought, okay, I'm just going to grit my teeth. I need the money. I've got to help my mum. I've got to get through it. And interestingly, sometimes life throws you a lifeline. And for me, the lifeline was I met some really lovely people, and I met the person who was now my husband, which was weird. And he's very calm and very supportive. And I know that's not the same for everyone. And he'd had some challenges, which very early on in our friendship, he shared with me and said, you know what, you can get through it. And it doesn't matter who that person is, actually, but it's just having someone there to say, and it reminds me of that Brené Brown clip about empathy. I can't change it for you, but actually I've been there and I'm here today, and you're going to be here today. So one of my points, I suppose, is about having that support network around you. And I had some amazing friends. So I used to work in Leeds who did their utmost for me. They said, we're here for you. Come to this christening, come to this. And they were still there, and they spent hours on the phone with me, and they didn't, let me out of their sight. And the house I'd moved into, I had these housemates that I didn't know, but they rallied around. So I think I was just really fortunate. And then after a year, and I think things did get worse at work, but then I was able to move into a different team and things looked up. But at that moment, I just had to keep plowing through it.
Can I just ask, because you're talking about the support networks, which is really great, but sometimes when we're in the shame place, to think about Brené Brown, right? It's really hard to, first of all, ask for any kind of support.
Yes.
Second of all, to even receive it, if it is sort of showing up. And I'm wondering, you obviously had serendipitously some great people that showed up. How were you showing up at that time? Were you able to ask for help, or was it just like they could see you were crumbling?
Really good question. I think initially I could talk about the workplace stuff, but the family stuff, absolutely, I felt really, really ashamed, and I have no idea why. It's such a good question. So how was I able to talk to people? I think I just thought to myself, I need to know that it's going to be okay. So I'm going to have to talk to some people so they reassure me, because I couldn't face the truth, and I couldn't face the reality that if someone had said to me, this is going to be really hard and tough, I don't know what I would have done at that moment. But because everyone was like, I'm sure it will be okay, I'm sure it will be okay, which in some circumstances isn't very helpful. Yeah. For me, it was super helpful because I thought, okay, everyone's telling me this, and inadvertently everyone was on the same page. I think I couldn't really eat. I couldn't really, I just didn't feel like myself. So I think I just said to people, I don't feel like myself and I don't really know what to do.
Okay, so you were able in some way to just say, this is what's going on. Interesting how for each of us, the shame thing can be more focused in one area or another. So it might be okay to talk, for example, in mental health, it's more okay to talk about physical health symptoms linked to burnout, for example, but to admit to other people that you may be suffering from depression or that you're having secret panic attacks, or it can feel like there is more maybe stigma or shame attached to it. So sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, absolutely. And it's like bipolar. So it's easier to say I feel depressed, I feel low. But if someone is in a manic phase, to hide those behaviors and then facing up to or seeing those people again when they might have huge judgments about that individual is very tough.
It's very tough. And you mentioned briefly just that your mum's mental health was impacted in some way through all the stress of it. And I'm curious about how that impacted your mental health.
Yeah, so I think what happened was a delayed response, which was, be the strong person, be the carer. And I didn't know that was the role, to be honest, at that time.
Sure. It's survival, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then it really hit me. And I think it even hit me maybe 8, 9 years later.
Wow.
Where I just thought, what has been going on? I don't even know, how did I manage it? I can't keep doing this. And it put me in a role that I didn't want to be in for the rest of my life.
So the role of carer or of survival, fight or flight, supporter?
Yeah, supporter, carer, doer of everything.
All the time, for everyone. Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Okay, so it hit you sort of maybe even that's almost a decade later. And there's a cumulative effect of trauma even, that might feel like a strong word, but for the workplace bullying, for the whole family situation, supporting your mum. And I'm just curious what that decade was like. How did you just feel like you could cope, like you had to, and it was, I hesitate to say okay, but you just didn't have a choice in a way. And then it hit you? What was that like?
I think it was more peaks and troughs, and I did have some counselling initially, again through work, so that was good. It wasn't particularly helpful, but it was something. And then it was peaks and troughs, because after that incident of bullying, I then had another bit of bullying. So stuff calmed down at work, and it was great. And then I moved into another team, and everything was fine. And then there was a merger, and then the manager said, I'm going to take early retirement because I don't want to be merged into this department. And we got this other woman became the manager, who I was actually friends with. She worked in a different department. As soon as she became the manager, it was like 10 tons of bricks on me. She stopped me doing work. She stopped me doing any high profile stuff. Behind my back, she gave my work to other people. So this was about, when was it? So this was 5 years later, it happened again. And at that point, I think I really crumbled. I crumbled more, I think, because things were slightly more settled in the family's sentiment. I'd worked really hard at this particular prestigious organisation. I felt really angry. The work I was doing was on race equality, and I was facing these microaggressions every day, and it really started to erode on me as a person. So you're trying to build yourself back up, and then it all went down again, and I just felt completely exhausted, and that I wasn't heard, and that I really was passionate about my job, and I was the expert, and yet here I was trying to be shut down.
And I'm just thinking, first of all, I'm thinking, how bad did it get? Like, how low did it have to go in order for a change to happen? That's my first question. Let's go there.
So when I realised that nothing was going to shift and the bullying was going to continue, and again, it was very different to the bullying I'd experienced before. So this was much more subtle. It was much more passive aggressive. It was much more exclusionary, if I can use that word. So I was like, I've got to get out of here. So I applied, and I think the other problem was when you're low and you can apply for jobs in the traditional fashion because you can't reach out to people because you just feel so low. I applied for about 45 jobs. So I had to keep going, and there were days where I knew I was really low, and on the road, I don't think I actually got there, but I was definitely at the crossroads for depression because I didn't want to get out of bed in the morning. I'd cry before going to work. Maybe I had no diagnosis, but that I was not in a good state of mental health. And then I finally got another job, and it was brilliant. And interestingly, it was with a colleague that I trusted at another institution. And within a couple of months of me starting the new role, I was so much better because I wasn't receiving the treatment. And you start to think, well, I'm not insane. It's not me. Because that was the other thing. I started to think, maybe it's me. Maybe it's me. Maybe I am like this. Maybe they've got a point. Maybe,
This is like emotional abuse, isn't it? That when you begin
absolutely.
it begins to affect your confidence, your self-worth, your ability to sell yourself within other roles. And my God, what a test of resilience to apply for 45 jobs as well. And to just keep going, I've got to keep applying. I've got to keep applying.
Yeah, because I was like, there's no future for me here. And it was annoying. And in the end, this individual, she didn't want me to do any work. She stopped me doing everything. So I actually flipped that around. I thought, okay, two things I'm going to do. One thing I did, which was really interesting, which I do recommend to people, and it got to the point where I couldn't stand anyone in the office either. I'd wear headphones like I'm wearing now and listen to American motivational internet radio. And my God, that was brilliant. It saved me. And actually, I ended up going on a radio show talking about something else. So that was good. The second thing I did was I thought, okay, they don't want me to do any work. My job to come in, if they want to pay me, is to apply for jobs. So I used that work time that was presenting a barrier, and I thought, I'm not going to fight this anymore. It's not worth it. And my job now is to apply for jobs. And if they want to pay for me for that, that's up to them.
Fair enough. So, I mean, yeah, totally fair enough. It's like, what is in your control, right? Rather than focusing on what isn't. So you've come from quite a low point. You've applied. You're finally in a new environment. But as you said, sort of a decade of things chipping away at your mental health, they don't just flip overnight due to a different environment. It can support you, and it feels like you had some sense of relief that it wasn't you, those sorts of things. But what were the little things that you've learned along the way to almost repair or look after your own mental health and move forward to this strong, confident place where you're running your own business?
So I think the journey that I'm still on, but that I have to remind myself of, is I'm not a super person. I'm not a superhero.
Yeah.
I'm not, I have a lot of energy, but then when I crash, my God, do I crash. So I have to remember, okay, I can't go to everything. I can't be there for everyone. I can't answer every email within 2 seconds. I can't, and that's okay, but it's quite hard.
It sounds like me. That's why I'm smiling. I'm like, oh my God. Because the crashes are intense when we drive ourselves forward. But it's really hard not to drive yourself forward when you found your mission, you're on the right path, you're running something that's valuable to you, that creates impact. So it's ticking all of these boxes. So it's really hard to go, oh, yesterday, which was Sunday, I was like, I'm going to not work all of one day and see what that feels like, And obviously I needed to do it, but how is it so, revolutionary to just not work?
I know. So that's one thing. I make sure that I do make time to go outside. And I'm not a particularly outdoorsy person. That's not me. I'm not at one with nature particularly. But just to go outside, get fresh air, go for walks.
What's the impact of that on you?
Yeah, so the impact is it just gives me a sense of a break, and actually I get really good ideas. So it's space, but it also means that I don't feel guilty because I know that I'm going to come back with new ideas or ways to solve problems, and it just takes the pressure off.
Absolutely.
Just takes the pressure off.
Okay, so going outside helps. What other things do you maybe try to do on good days to invest in yourself or to try and prevent those crash points?
Yeah, so one of the things I try and do is to do the Pomodoro technique, where you set your alarm and you work for a particular time frame and you get lots done, and then taking a break, because otherwise, as you'll know, running your own business, 7 o'clock, and then it's 7 o'clock and you think, where's the day gone? Oh, I haven't eaten. I haven't done that. My arm's really stiff from typing all day. It's just not good for you, is it? So that's one thing. And another thing I have to do, which is really hard, and again, it's not from a place of people pleasing. It's from a place of I want to do everything and be involved in everything, is saying no and turning work down. And it's really difficult. It's really difficult, but just looking at my diary and saying I don't work on Fridays outside. I stay at home and I sort things out on a Friday. And I can't do this, and not making myself rush from meeting to meeting. And one of the things that always sticks in my head, my very good friend Gabriella Kerr-Gordon, who was an apprentice with me when I worked at Imperial College, and she came in, it's her first day, she was like, okay, I'm going to help you with some diary management. Bearing in mind she's a good 10 years younger than me, and she got my diary and she said, I'm not happy with this. You're rushing from meeting to meeting. Where is your break time? Where is your travel time? I want to see this color coded. I was like, yes, miss. And I'll never forget that. And so now when we meet, I'm always like, here's my diary. And people being quite strict in a really helpful way, and actually color coding the diary and blocking stuff out. It's basic stuff, but it really does help me.
Do you have some criteria for saying no to work?
Yes, I've been really strict again with myself, and if it's not at the price point I want it to be, and it involves a lot of work, and I've just taken something on that's like that, but that's it, that is the last thing because it was committed to a while ago, I won't do it anymore. And actually, I'll say to someone, oh, if you want someone cheaper, I can recommend other people for you, because actually, what is the point of running around absolutely everywhere? I'm talking about well-being and mental health and then making myself ill. It's nonsense.
It is ridiculous, but we do it. And it does lead to burnout. But hopefully we can begin to recognize the signs within our body and our mind early on. So I know if I start having a bit of shortness of breath, or I start getting irritable with my kids, or think little hints like that, I'm like, whoa, I realize that, what I need to do. And then I also try and map out, when I was employed by someone, what were the things that I did? Because I used to be really strict with routines around taking lunch breaks, bringing in healthy food, going for a walk and listening to a podcast, things like that. And then when I'm working for myself, I don't have the structure of a lunch break. So I'm like, oh, I'm not listening to anything uplifting, or like you were listening to the motivational stuff. I'm like, but I'm really passionate about getting this project done. So our own routines and boundaries and saying no is very valuable. What advice might you give to somebody who's experiencing workplace bullying or bullying of some kind, that could have maybe shortened, I don't know, in hindsight, right? The time that your confidence was being chipped away at and all of that. What advice would you give to them?
So the first thing I would say is find out who to speak to. If you don't want to make a formal complaint, I understand that. Get familiar with the policy. If you're part of the trade union, talk to your trade union rep. If you have dignity at work advisors, talk to someone. If you've got a trusted colleague, talk to someone. Use the organisation's policy, processes, procedures to challenge what's going on. Decide what you want to do. Map out your strategy. Think about whether it's worth you staying. See if you could get your line manager change. If it's your line manager, if it's a colleague, can you separate the distance? And don't be afraid to join help groups. Call Bullying UK, call ACAS, get your information. Make sure you feel that your armour is on in an appropriate way. Make the decision about what you want to do. Where possible, don't keep silent. So you don't want to go around telling everyone, right, but the people that you trust, and how, have they faced this before? How could they help you navigate it? And then if it's not going to go forward, get your support networks outside, whether that's online, face-to-face, on the phone, social media, and maneuver your way out and use lots of pronged approaches. So, you might want to apply for jobs. You talk to people, share your vision with people. I'm looking for new opportunities. When you feel low, I appreciate that that's really tough, but you can just choose one small thing to do. So that could be, I know there's a secondment in that team, or I'm going to go ask the manager I trust over there to see if there's a secondment in the team. So it's small and it's manageable. And remember, it's not you. And actually, another thing I found really helpful is work with someone who does these amazing storytelling workshops, and they're from an African tradition. And in one of the workshops, she makes us come up with like a phrase or a mantra that we can say to ourselves every morning. So I would say, and I know this won't work for a lot of people, but I would say write something down. So mine is, I know I will be the positive change I want to see, and I will see it every day. And just put it somewhere when you feel low, and just looking at that, or a beautiful picture that makes you feel happy, and look at it as you walk out the door and think, I'm going to come home to that and it is going to be okay. And also remember that you have to make some tough decisions. So you might not get there overnight. Think about think about the challenge, think about the question, think about the decision, and just focus and work towards that.
I love that so much. And what I'm hearing you say is, figure out the things that are in your control, and there's a wealth of things that are in your control, even if some of the surrounding environment might feel like it's not in your control. I'm just curious about, I bet there was a bit of time in the workplace, or even at school, if we go right back, where little things were happening and you didn't feel great about it, and like, at what point did you go, this is bullying? Because it's usually after like consistent, right? Like, how does somebody even know this is workplace bullying, and I should start to do some of the things you're saying?
Yeah, that's also a really important question. I guess in school I didn't really know it was how I felt,
Yeah.
and the exclusion. And that's probably why I do the work that I do now, because I hate exclusion. It makes me feel sick. And it's not just about me, it's about everyone.
Yeah.
And at work, I think those behaviors were quite obvious. And I think because I then started to work in the area of bullying, I knew. So the things that people might want to reflect on and look out for and think about what they can manage. And it might be that someone doesn't realize and then they have a conversation with a person and it stops. So that's also important to remember.
Yeah.
So withholding information on purpose, not inviting people to important meetings, excluding people from workplace functions. I think it does happen, but it's seen less because people could call it out. Shouting, standing over someone's desk, being in someone's personal space when it's not invited, so in an inappropriate fashion, micromanaging someone, over checking their work, which is what this woman did to me consistently, undermining people, interrupting people consistently at meetings, and not because that's that person and they do it to everyone, but picking on someone.
Yeah.
Making snide comments, using someone's personal characteristics and throwing it back at them.
Absolutely. And I guess if you're worried that it could be bullying, but you're not sure, either talking to someone or looking at Bullying UK, like I bet they've got lists of things
Yes.
that could be going on for you. And I really noticed your passion when you said the thing around exclusion when you were younger and how that's like impacted your whole career path. And I felt your passion then. And it says to me that sometimes this really shitty things that happen in our lives, it feels uncomfortable to even admit it, but they become our purpose. So, which is like we turn our adversity, or we can, into our advantage, to our purpose. So just tell us a bit more about that purpose for you now and where people can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. And one story I just want to quickly share is,
Please.
I remember being in a yoga class, and at the end, the teacher said, right, think of someone who's been a really good teacher to you. And it might not be someone who was kind or who was helpful. It might be someone who actually made your life very difficult, but taught you valuable lessons. And I thought, yes, she's absolutely right. And I thought about this individual, and the way she treated me was horrific. But the upshot was I got an amazing job. I got amazing opportunities. And I probably wouldn't, if she was lovely, I wouldn't have pushed myself in that way. I'm here today doing what I do. And the other thing is, karma is very powerful, or whatever, your spiritual or viewpoint on the matter, because she then got kicked out by someone very senior in the organization. So it really came back on it. It took 5 years, but it happened.
So kind of trust that process. But I literally got chills when you were like, who was your best teacher? And we think of, like, even our parents, we think are the most caring, but actually, what are the challenging situations, or what was the situation you were forced into? I can thank my ex-husband for quite a few things that sort of created the environment you needed, or the inner environment, to really push yourself to your higher purpose, or the thing that you're really meant to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So my purpose now, yes, where can people find me? So my website is diverseminds.co.uk, and it's also at Diverse Minds UK on Twitter and Facebook, and my name, Leyla, Leyla Okhai, Okhai, on LinkedIn. And what I try and do is I have, if anyone's interested, top 10 wellbeing tips. So you receive a tip a day to your inbox, all about supporting your wellbeing and mental health, and I refer to lots of other sources, and I do a fortnightly news/blog update, and I just published one today by I had a guest blogger, Andrea Goodridge from Ad Florem, who's talking about creating an inclusive workplace.
Amazing. I will be signing up. It sounds like really valuable content. Leyla, thank you so much for your time, your vulnerability, and so many practical tips. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so much.